Hello, everybody. Welcome to a basics cooking class. We're looking at some sweet and savory hand pies tonight. We're going to make an apple filling, a chicken pot pie filling, and also the pie dough, and have a look at how all that stuff gets put together. So my name is Sam Maggi. I'm a culinary mentor and chef here at Basics Market. Our recipes tonight feature our own local organic Lulabelle's butter and our Lulabelle's heavy cream and organic free-range eggs from Gwendolyn's, which is our own brand of eggs. So all this stuff is fresh, local here to the Portland area. It's raised just 20 minutes south of Portland. They have an organic diet, these chickens, pasture grass, ground corn, soy meal, vitamins, and minerals. So these are all our own dairies and hens right here in the Willamette Valley. If you have any questions during the class, you can just type them into the Q&A box. Recipes for this class are available on our Basics Market website, as well as past classes and some skills videos and all kinds of recipes besides these recipes. So let's go ahead and get started. First, I'd like to get going on the pie dough. This is a great pie dough. It's good for hand pies. It's good for regular pies. It just is a really workable and simple and nice and flaky and all that stuff you want from a pie dough. And it's good to use a good quality butter, which this Lulabelle's butter is really butter. And here, so you want some chilled butter. We're using half a pound, and this makes can make 2 bottom crusts, or a bottom and a top crust, or 8 hand pies. So let's see. First, we're going to get some flour. We're going to start with 2.5 cups of flour. I'm using all-purpose flour here, and this is another local product here in Portland, Bob's Red Mill, all stone ground, which makes for a great textured flour. You can use gluten-free flour with this pie dough recipe. I have done it. It's just a little trickier to work with. It's a little more delicate, as is the case with gluten-free product in general, but it does work. And so it's, if that's a dietary issue for anyone, you can use gluten-free like Bob's 1-to-1. All right, so now here's just a teaspoon of kosher salt. You want to put that right in with your flour. And then it's good to just whisk that salt in. And you want to get that just so it's all around in there. All right, now for the butter. So the butter is cold, and the idea here is when you're making your pie dough, you want the butter to hold together a little bit, because what we're doing is we're going to create some lamination. So when you roll it out, you're getting sheets of butter in between the flour, and that's where you get your nice layers in your pie crust. Yes, I think we have a question.
Delia would like to know, is bread flour okay to use?
I think you'd be okay with bread flour. It might be a little heavier of a texture, but if that's what you have, I think you'll be good. And actually, bread flour might be a good fit for the hand pies, especially because you kind of want a sturdy hand pie. And it sort of brings me to what I wanted to talk a little bit about, the history of pies and pie dough at this point. And so pie dough, in its first inception, was not an edible ingredient. It wasn't something that people wanted to eat. It was more of a functional thing. And so it came, pies came about from people wanting a vessel on which they could put on a flame, on a fire, and not burn their food, their vegetables or their meat that they're cooking. So you'd use leaves, you'd use mud, and then as soon as kind of grains came around, people started playing around with water and grains and making these baskets, if you would, of dough, and putting their material that they're cooking, their food on that, and cooking the food, and then they'd have this kind of somewhat edible leftover remnant, their cooking vessel, and they wouldn't really eat that, but it would catch all the meat juices and all the whatever stuff that was coming down, and would keep the food from getting burnt. And then the crust would get tossed out, and people who were less fortunate would eat that, or would get handed to hungry people, or they'd find it and eat it. And it was in medieval times that pie dough and crust, the word crust didn't come around until the American Revolution. Up until that time, and even with the Pilgrims and so forth, it was called a coffin. And the word coffin was used for a pie crust because the word coffin just means a basket or a box. So that's what this was. It was a coffin, and you carried the food. And another function, as the crust developed from being a cooking vessel, when you think about like clay-baked stuff, same deal, but people who had access to water and grain would make their vessels with that. And it was a little tastier than mud, right? And so they found, hey, this is okay. But as pies developed, and then especially hand pies, you had this container. The crust was the container, and it actually kept the food fresh. It could keep it hot. It could keep it warm. I mean, when we had the pasty class, and we talked about how the miners would go down with a pasty, which is a type of hand pie. And the miners would go into the mines, and that pasty, they'd have all kinds of terrible chemicals on their hands and things from mining, and they'd be able to eat the inside of the filling of the pasty and then discard the crust, which was really just to carry the food down there, keep it hot. And if you got a nibble of it, it tasted all right. And so that's kind of how crust started out, but through the ages, it's become a thing of its own, and now we have the ultimate crust, which we're making right here, and this is really, the apex of the crust. It's perfect. And anyway, so you saw I cubed up the butter, I put it in there, and I worked it into this sort of texture that's almost sand-like, but it has a few little bits, pea-sized bits of butter, and that's a good thing, like for that lamination. I think we have a question.
Terry wants to know, why are you using two hands to mix the crust? And we also have a question about that tool.
Oh, okay, great. So there's a question about why am I using two hands to mix the crust, and what the heck is this thing? I have no idea what my hands are doing. They do what they will, and I think I'm just using two hands because it's messier, and I really, you can use one hand or two hands or no hands, and you can just use this. I like to stick my hands in there a little bit to feel the texture, which is that sort of, I want to get it to that granular texture, but really, you don't want to touch it too much because you want to keep that butter cold, and your fingers will warm it up. And sometimes I apply my fingers a little bit just to work it in a tad, to get it to that point where it's breaking up nicely. And this thing is a really great tool. This is a pastry cutter. So this is a good way to cut in the butter. And then this is also another dough working tool. And if you just have this, it's called a bench knife or a dough scraper sometimes. But this will also cut your butter in really nicely. And then this is useful for all kinds of stuff, which we'll get into as we progress with this crust. But it's also good. I use this all the time just for cleaning. Like here, I can just clean off this flour off my board, or for scooping stuff up. So if you don't have one of these, should consider it. It's an excellent tool. So we've got a pastry cutter, and then, and sometimes this is also called a pastry cutter, but often a bench knife or a dough scraper. So those are two great tools when you're working with pie crust. So now, another important thing, ice cold water. So this is 3/4 of a cup of water, and it has a bunch of ice in it. And so you want the ice cold water to, again, keep that butter cold and kind of keep it a little bit separate from the flour to get your layers, right? So I'm going to go ahead and add about half of that. And then I have a wooden spoon here, and I'm going to mix it in. And I'm just looking to get all the flour and butter sticking together, kind of moist. And you just want to find any dry spots and moisten them up. And it usually takes me, with this recipe, it really is like 3/4 of a cup of water, but keep an eye on it. It can, depending on what flour you're using and what butter temperature and all kinds of things, it may take less or more. But yeah, it's exciting to have this weather where here we can bake and not worry about all the heat. I love to bake, and I like making doughs a lot. Sometimes I get teased that I'm the dough guy or something, because I do a lot of stuffing doughs, and I'm interested in exploring all the different kinds. Yes, another question.
Could you do this in the food processor?
Oh yeah, you can. And so here, okay, so there was a question, and the question was, can you do this in the food processor? And yes, you can. And I just want to stop before I answer that question. I'm just using my hand a little bit here, and this is just, once you get everything sticking together, you can gather it with your hand. And here I'm just kind of pressing in those crumbs, because I don't really want to add more moisture, but I do want it to come together. And so this is the point where you want to be careful. And if you're like me, I like making bread a lot, so I'm always wanting to knead. But you don't want to knead this, because when you start to knead it, you're going to develop gluten. And that gluten is where it gets tough. And again, back in the old days, or like, when you're looking for a carrying case for your filling, you'd actually use like hot water, and you'd knead the dough, and you get it nice and firm, and you can, and that's still the technique. Like if you're making a pork pie or something like that, you will get into that. But here we don't want to knead it. We just want to gather it together so it holds together, and that's what we've got there, a nice dough ball. Now, as far as using a Cuisinart, a lot of people like the Cuisinart. I always had an argument with my father, because he liked to use the Cuisinart for the dough, and I always felt you should use your hands and really get a feel for it. But he would say, well, Julia Child says use a Cuisinart. Once she got a hold of a Cuisinart, that's how she does her pie dough. And the theory of the Cuisinart is that you're not touching it with your fingers, so you should be able to keep that butter even cooler, And again, I think a little touch is almost necessary for me, the way I like to do the dough, just to get that butter going, but I don't want to heat it up really or melt it. But sometimes, you know, I like to have my hands on there. But my father always made his pie dough with the Cuisinart once he got a hold of one. So yes, the Cuisinart works just fine. So here's our dough ball. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut the dough ball in half, and this becomes our 2 discs. So this would be, you know, your top and bottom crust, and or, you know, 4 pies and 4 hand pies, and we're doing hand pies tonight, so this would be 8 hand pies. It looks like we have another question. Yes.
Is the pie dough drier than cookie dough when you form it into a ball? Is the question.
The question is the pie dough drier than cookie dough? And the answer is yes. It's dry, it's going to be a little bit flaky, and that's what you want. A cookie dough is more, you know, wet than pie dough. So your pie dough is going to be a bit dry. So here I have some plastic wrap, and plastic wrap is really a good tool here for getting your dough into shape for chilling. We're going to chill the dough next. So what I usually do is I wrap it up, and then I press it down into a disc. Now, if I'm making a pie with this in a pie plate, I'm really going to press it as much as I can into that disc shape, and then it will make it really easy to roll out onto the pie plate, right, which is something like this bowl as far as circumference goes. So I really want to push it out, and then also I don't want to leave any air pockets with the plastic wrap because you don't want it to dry out at all. So once this is done, this can go right in the refrigerator. You can also freeze it, and then so you can make a bunch of dough, freeze it, and bring it out as you need it, as you need to use it. You know, not need it. Remember, don't need the dough. And so again, this would be you know, like a bottom and top crust of a pie, and this is just a fabulous recipe to learn and use for all kinds of pies or quiches, and of course hand pies, which we're making tonight. Okay, so that's it on the crust. The dough for the crust or the coffin. I like, since it's almost Halloween, you should maybe stick to calling it a coffin, right? And along those lines, in England in medieval times, they'd make a lot. So pies, when they started out, they didn't have a lot of. There weren't fruit fillings; they were all meat fillings, and so in Britain, in the Middle Ages, they do a lot of whole bird pies with the little legs sticking out of the coffin, and you'd use the legs and the feet as a handle for your pie. The first pie recipes are actually from ancient Egypt, and then the Greeks were making pies, and the Romans spread the word of the pie around Europe, and then everyone started doing pies. But all cultures around the world have some version of a hand pie because it's such a great portable food. It looks like we have another question.
Mita would like to know how long do they last in the freezer? So I'm not sure if she wonders how long they rest in the refrigerator, or if the dough could be frozen, how long they
Right. So Mita has a question about how long the dough will last if you put it in the freezer. So if you wrap it like that in the plastic wrap, and then maybe put it in a Ziploc or a Tupperware, you have a good 6 months on that pie dough. And you can bring it out, thaw it out, and then work with it. Yeah. And then as far as in the refrigerator goes, 3 days is a good amount. If you just have it chilled, and it's a great idea to chill it overnight. It really makes it easy to work with. So back to hand pies, right? So meat pies and even dessert meat pies, Romans did have a sweet pie, but it was a sweet meat pie. And anyway, so yeah, all the cultures have developed, you know, we have empanadas, we have samosas, bao, we've done the bao class. That's I call that a hand pie of sorts. So it's dough that is stuffed with something, and you can put anything you want. Now you know how to make the dough. You can just put any leftovers, anything you want. But here I have a couple great recipes to share with you. One is the chicken fricassee, and so let's get into this. So this is like a chicken pot pie, fricassee. Both the recipes I'm showing you tonight are considered American classics, but they both were the first written versions of both of these recipes come from around the 1300s. One from France, and that's the fricassee, and one from England, and that would be the apple pie filling. But through time, America has adopted both of these recipes, and we think of these as classic American recipes. So for the chicken fricassee, you'd use 2 pounds of boneless, skinless chicken thighs. I'm making a half recipe tonight for this demonstration, and a half recipe is a pretty good amount. Really, a full recipe, as it reads on a recipe card, will make you a whole bunch of chicken fricassee and filling, and it's great stuff. And you can freeze this stuff too. You can freeze the filling on its own and bring it out. And so you can have frozen dough, frozen filling, and put them together, or you can stuff your pies and not bake them and freeze them. And we'll talk more about that when we get to putting the pies together. So I've heated up my skillet. I have a 12-inch iron cast skillet here, and I have all my stuff here, including some butter. Okay, so again, here's the butter and here's the chicken. So this was boneless, skinless thighs. Thighs are good because they'll retain their moisture. You can use any cut you like, though, anything you can get your hands on will work. Thigh is a good one, though, because we're going to be cooking it and then it's going to go into the oven again. So you want something that's going to sort of retain moisture. And all I've done is chop this chicken up pretty fine, pretty small pieces, because you want it with the hand pie, you really want whatever ingredients you use to be cut small so that they'll come together into a good ball for you, okay? All right, so melting the butter, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put my salt and pepper on the chicken, and we're going to just coat that chicken with the salt and pepper. And so in a classic fricassee, you don't want to brown the chicken. You want to keep it, you want to cook it a little bit at this point. And again, I have more Julia Child quotes for you tonight. She said that the fricassee is somewhere between a saute and a stew. And so what the fricassee is a combination of words of chopped up and fried in French. So anyway, that's kind of, we're going to saute the chicken here until it's just cooked on the outside a little bit, and it's going to have more of a chance to cook. In a minute, we'll dump it back in with the rest of our ingredients. So we're going to move it around so that it gets nice and cooked on the outside. Okay, so we got our salt, our pepper, our chicken, our butter. Now, let's have a look at an onion. So again, I'm doing half a recipe, so I'm just going to use half of an onion, but I always like to, whenever I can, show how to mince up, dice an onion. It's a great skill to have for all kinds of recipes. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut through the middle off of down the stem
So root in. So I have the half here. And then it peels really nicely this way. So you should be able to just peel it right off. And I have my feet pretty high because I'm trying to cook it quickly, but again, I'm trying not to brown it. And if you brown it a little bit, it's not the end of the world, but I'm still keeping it pretty brown there. Okay. We have a question, yes.
Just how would you let folks know that we're working on the notes, where there is a sound issue, so just let people know we're working on it.
Oh, so there are sound issues I hear, and we are trying to solve the sound issues. So I guess it doesn't matter what I say, but I'll keep talking. I'm sorry about the sound issues. So I'm going to go ahead and cut with the knife lengthwise, along the lines of the onion, and then we're going to cut across dice. And we'll get a nice dice out of that. So there's the onion. And then I have here already some diced up carrots and celery. Well, this chicken is cooking a little more. Just demonstrate the carrot. So with the carrot, you want to create a flat surface. And then go ahead and cut across. And then julienne. And then when you cut across this, you'll get your dice.
Okay, so now this chicken is cooked enough. I'm going to go ahead and throw it onto this platter. And so now what we're left with is a beautiful fawn, and fawn is just what's on the bottom of the pan here. And so we're going to bring this up, and it's going to create our nice sauce for the fricassee, right? And so let's go ahead and we're going to add our onions. We're going to add some garlic. We're going to add the carrots. And you can see it's that nice fine dice. Is the sound better at all now? We got sound. Now I have to think of some good stuff to say, right? So we have our carrots in that fine dice. And now let's look at a celery. So I have some cut already here. But let's it's nice to go through some basic knife skills once in a while. So you just cut that celery into julienne lengthwise. And then again, you can see I've cut the celery into 2 or 3 pieces just to make it easier for the knife blade to go through. And then I'm going to cut across. And again, this is how you get a nice, even, uniform and small dice. So there's my celery. And so we just want to give this a couple minutes, let them soften, and it looks like we have a question. Yes. Oh, okay. So, the question was, could I explain again about the origin of the fricassee? Is that the, so fricassee? Yeah, fricassee. The first known recipe written recipe for fricassee is from the 1300s, and it's from France. And fricassee is where you're frying. So the fricassee, I guess, I don't know, the French origin of the word is to fry, and also in the cassé is to chop up. So it's a chopped up fried thing, but specifically it also gets a sauce. And as I mentioned before, Julia Child called it in between a saute and a stew. And so it's kind of is like a tight stew, and that's why it really lends itself well to like a hand pie, because you want something that's going to hold together in your pie. It's not going to just run out loose. So you don't want a whole lot of sauce, but you want some sauce, you want some juice, you know, for everything to kind of be buoyed in all your nice morsels, but you know, you don't want it running all over the place. So that's the fricassee. And now fricassee is like a chicken pot pie. It's really become an American standard, and it's used, you know, a lot here. Now, speaking of that binding, now we're going to add a little bit of flour. So the flour, we're going to sort of make a bit of a roux here. And so I'm just going to sprinkle that evenly over the veggies. And what you want to do here is just coat all your vegetables evenly. And you want to cook the flour a little bit, because what's going to happen is you want to cook out that floury flavor. And so just you get a little heat on there, and it should turn, you can see it's turning a little bit golden for us. And that's what we want. Okay, so we got our flour in there. And now, so I mean, I'm going to speed through this a little bit. So you'd let this go for about 5 minutes, but because of our time restraints, I'm going to rush it a little bit, and we should be okay. So now I'm going to add some wine. This is just some cooking wine here. And so wine is a great acidic deal that is good for bringing up the fond. The fond is just those little bits of chicken that is stuck to the bottom of the pan when we were doing the saute earlier. And that's all great, really good flavor. So you want to bring that up off the bottom of your pan. And so that's what we're doing there. And I am going to switch to my wooden spoon here. And it just had a little flour on it, so that won't hurt anything. So so you can see that the wine just brings up all that nice stuff, all that flavor, the concentrated flavor that's on the bottom of the skillet. And then after the wine, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add my stock. Yes, it looks like we have a question.
Can you make the chicken? And how early can you?
All right, we have a good question. So the question is, can you make this filling ahead of time and refrigerate it? And the answer is yes, you can make this filling ahead of time. And in fact, it's really great to refrigerate it, because then it, as you'll see, I have one refrigerated, and I'll bring it out. And when we make the pies, it really holds together nicely when it's cold. And you can freeze it as well. And I don't know if the sound was working earlier when I mentioned you can freeze this fricassee. If you make the full recipe, it makes quite a bit, and you might want to just use half, freeze half, and then you can pull it out and use it when it's thawed. And then the second part of the question was, can you assemble the pie and then refrigerate it unbaked? And yes, you can do that. I think the fricassee recipe will work better than the apple pie recipe. The apple pie one is a little juicy, and so it will start to sog your dough a little bit, but this recipe is nice and tight, and once it's refrigerated, it almost becomes like a solid, and it'll do great in the refrigerator for a couple days, 2-3 days, and then you can bake them. You could make a whole bunch and bake one every day over a few days, and that would be quite enjoyable. Okay, now some bay leaves, or so the bay leaf goes in there. That'll just give a nice flavor. You want to make sure to pull those out right before you stuff your pies, so no one gets a bite of bay leaf. We're also going to add a bit of thyme at this point. So thyme, I just wanted to show. So thyme grows great in our yards and gardens, and it's a good one to have around. So for the thyme, you just pull it right off the stem, and then you have the leaves, and that's what we're looking for. And you just give those a little mince, and then I have a bunch already cut there to add. And so the thyme, it makes a beautiful aromatic and flavor. And so you can see that how nice that is coming together. I have the heat on medium low right now. I just want a little bit of a simmer. And with the vegetables also, you don't want to brown the vegetables. You just want to cook them till they're soft and tender a little bit. Okay, so at this point, we're going to add the chicken back in. And so that chicken is partially cooked, and now it's going to cook some more. And you can see how it's coming together, right? Looking like chicken pot pie. Looks like we have a question. Yes. All right, so we have a question, and the question is, if you were to freeze your pies before you bake them, would you thaw them before baking or put them in frozen? And I would recommend just putting them in the oven frozen. Your bake time will go up a little bit, a few minutes, but they'll hold their shape and they won't sog out. And they'll thaw out real quick in a hot oven. So I just would put them in frozen, and it will work great. Okay, so we've got our chicken in there, and now I have some of that beautiful Lulabelle's cream. This is great stuff. It's sold at our basics markets and made by our company. And the cows, we know the cows are having a good time just minutes down the road from where I stand now. They're probably enjoying this cool weather. And this cream is nice and thick. It whips up really great. It has wonderful flavor. So I'm going to go ahead and put that cream in, move it around, and then we'll throw in our peas. And so this would all take a little, you'd want to give that chicken more time to cook if you're doing this recipe in real time. Of course, I'm speeding it up, so please, make sure your chicken is cooked through. And to test that, you let it simmer at that low heat, and then just fork tender chicken, when it comes apart, it's good to go. And it's usually about 10 minutes or so on that slow heat. So we've got the cream in there, and the peas. So that was just some frozen peas. That's what I had available today. But if you have fresh peas or access to fresh peas, that's a good deal there. And then I have some parsley. So I have my Italian parsley and tarragon. Tarragon is this one. Again, this is a good one you can grow in your yard or garden. And it's a really beautiful flavor with chicken. Chicken and tarragon is always a lovely pairing. And so the tarragon, again, you just pull the leaves off the stem, chop it like so, and then I have more in here that I've already done. And then I just had some Italian parsley, and that's your finish. And voila, that's our fricassee. So from here, and I'm just going to let this thing kind of simmer while we get into the apple stuff, and then it will be cooked by the end of class for sure. But there it is, and so from here you can cool it, and then fill your pies. So I have some cooled, and when we get to the putting the hand pies together, I'll pull that out, and you can see how nicely it holds together. Okay, so let's look at apples real quick. So apple pie filling. Oh, and I forgot one fun fact. This chicken fricassee was one of Abraham Lincoln's favorite foods. So it has that going for it. Okay, now we can talk about apples. Let me grab my apple stuff and I'll be right back. Okay, here's apple stuff. And here's some nice chilled pie dough. I'm gonna keep that chilled. Okay, so first we're going to go ahead and cut up some apples. So this recipe calls for 6 apples. And I'd just like to I'm going to just demo one apple. To peel an apple, you can either use a peeler like a potato peeler, or you can use a paring knife. And this was always one of my jobs when my mom still does make a lot of apple pies, and I would always be the peeler. And I always liked this job because you can make this nice long peel thing and it's somehow satisfying. And you just want to run that knife right under the skin of the apple and twist the apple around, turn it over, and then you get your peel. And then, you know, it's just so satisfying. And then, yeah, we have a question. Yes. Vegetarian, the question, oh, we have a question about making a vegetarian version of the fricassee. Sure, you know, you could add any, I have vegetarian children. And so when I make them hand pies, I can put in, like, they love sweet potatoes, you know, some starchy vegetables, root vegetables, parsnips, that sort of thing is a great substitute. Mushrooms, really good. So just make up the weight of the meat with some starchy or vegetables or mushrooms, and you're good to go. Or you can use tempeh. Tempeh, I really like tempeh as a meat substitute. I think it has a good bite and it holds up well in something like this. Those are some recommendations, or, you know, any sort of meat substitute you like would work well in here. So one thing about the apple, to core it, I like to go right down from the stem and I kind of find where that core is. And then from here, I can work around the core. And then I have just take the core right out. And then I have kind of 4 pieces to dice up. Yeah, we have another question. The question, the question further on the fricassee meat substitute deal. Can we, with mushrooms, would there be too much moisture is the question, and would you need to cook that out? What I would do is just treat the mushrooms and the root vegetables, for that matter. I'd throw those in like you would with the chicken, and so give those the saute and the butter first and kind of cook that moisture out, and then put them on the plate like I did with the chicken, and then go ahead and just follow the recipe and you should be in good shape. So you can see this technique for dicing apples is pretty handy. I just go to the side, cut it across, and then stack, and then I can go right through them and I get diced really quickly. And again, you want to dice small because when we scoop, we want all those apples to sort of hold in that ball shape so that the pie, the hand pie, has some good shape to it. All right, we're going to go ahead and grab the rest of my apples. So this is a really nice, simple filling. Here is, thank you. Here's the apples that the 5 other apples. So that's sort of what that looks like. Again, this is a lot of apple filling. It's enough for, you know, a good amount of hand pies, 8 hand pies, or a couple big pies. The fricassee is coming along nicely. It smells really good, by the way. Here, I give you some. Yes, another question. So what I've got, the question is what sort of apples do I recommend? And I recommend any apple you can get your hands on, really, but for, you know, it's a personal preference. So if there's an apple you like, use it. I tend to prefer for pies a firmer apple. But you know, there's like these are pretty firm red type apples here. Fuji's, and that's what I used here. I have half Fuji's and half Granny Smith, and I like to mix the apples like with a sweeter variety like that Fuji, and the Granny Smith is really tart, but has that really great texture that will hold up in the pie. So you can mix and match. You could go straight Granny Smith is classic, you know, like a green apple. There's so many varieties of apples, and really we don't see all of them all the time in the markets, but there's an incredible amount of apples. Apples are fairly new to the Americas. They were used for thousands of years before they came to America in Europe and in Asia. And again, the first apple pie recipe was written in 1318, published in Britain. And that's for sure how apple pie got to America, is through our British ancestors. And they brought the apple trees with them too, the apple seeds. Okay, so here's the apples. Here's some sugar. This is 6 tablespoons of sugar. And throw that in there. And we're going to go ahead and give it a little twirl. This is, I underestimated the amount of spoons I'd be using tonight. Okay, so here we go. This is the sugar, and then I've got cinnamon, nutmeg, and cloves here. These are all ground spices that really go nice with apples. And then I have 2 tablespoons of flour. And again, we're sprinkling that over, and like with the fricassee, this is the binder here. And then you want it, again, like with the fricassee, you want it to coat all of our material here. So what's going to happen as this cooks, the flour will kind of bind everything together a little bit and make for a thicker sauce. Yes, a question. The question is, could you use cornstarch instead of flour for your binder? And yes, you could. You can, and that is a lot of commercial pies will use cornstarch. And what you get with the cornstarch is sort of a clearer, you know, you get that real clear, thick kind of look, and it works. It works good. I have done that before. And again, you just want to have enough to coat all your apples. Here's lemon juice, and it's the juice of half a lemon and the zest of half a lemon. So the zest is just, you know, where you grate the rind of the lemon, and a lot of the flavor, a lot of citrus flavor is in the rind of citrus. That's where the oil lives, and so that flavor really carries into your dish if you put the zest in. And that's it. That's our filling. And that is an apple hand pie filling, or just regular apple pie filling. As simple as that. So there we go. And now we'll bring out the finished doughs. So I have my chilled dough here, and I have couple of fillings. And let's go ahead and make some hand pies. All right. So each of these discs will make 4 hand pies. Now, this is your pie. So you could make them smaller if you want. You could make little ones. Or you could make them larger. You could make giant ones. It's entirely up to you. But the size that we're looking at today are kind of this size, which I like. I think this is a nice size pie, right? And so to get there, I'm going to cut the disc. This is the chilled dough, first in half and then into quarters. And then each of these quarters, we form a ball. And it looks like we have a question. Yes.
Someone just wanted, cooking the apples.
Yes, the question is asking for a confirmation that we're not cooking the apples for the filling, and that is correct. So the apple pie, you'll notice that that recipe for the apple pie bakes longer than the fricassee, than the chicken pot pie, because the chicken pot pie, the filling is cooked. So really you're just cooking the crust. So you're looking at about half an hour or so at 375. But with the apple pie, the apples have to cook. And a good tell for when the apples are done, it can be up to 45 minutes. But once it starts to get that, the liquid will come out a little bit, and you'll see that kind of caramelized, that delicious caramelized apple stuff coming out. Then you'll know you're good to go. And once the crust is kind of nice and brown. Okay, so while I'm working on one piece of dough, I kind of cover my others with a towel or with some plastic wrap. You can see I have a nice little bowl of flour to work with here, and that's to keep my dough from sticking to the board I'm working on here. And then I have a rolling pin, and I'm just going to work the dough out and around. I flip it over a lot. I give it some flour so that it doesn't stick too much on the board. And you're looking to get it to just about, a quarter of an inch or so, or an eighth of an inch. An eighth of an inch is good. And then, so it's something like this. It's a disc like this. And it really is, like, for me, it's about the size of my hand. And that's works for me. And but we all have different hands. But that's how I can measure it, and it ends up to be about that eighth of an inch in width or thickness. Okay. So here you just want to get a nice even roll. You don't want it to stick. So again, flipping it over, going in different directions. And if it's not a perfect circle, that's okay, because you'll see we're going to trim them up a little bit. You just want to have enough width on it that you can work with it a little bit. Okay, so there we go. Here we go. Ferrum dinkum. That's for the Australians watching. Okay, so let's go ahead and check out what's going on with this. Is the chilled fricassee. So you can see it's like more of a solid. Here it is, warm, liquid, and then chilled, solid. And so here I have a scoop. This is a 4-ounce scoop, so it's a half a cup scoop. You could just use a 1/2 cup measure, but this is a good amount of filling. This works well. And then I have here 1 egg and a teaspoon of water, which I've just whisked together. And this is going to be the glaze as well as the glue. So to glue, I'm going to just put a little bit of this egg wash, this is called, around the around the edge of my dough. And then we'll put that 1/2 cup of filling. And these ice cream scoop deals are really handy for this because, one, it gives you a really nice shape. And then also it has that release, which is handy, where you can just pop it out. And so if you have an ice cream scoop with the thingy, that's perfect. All right, so my fricassee is just about done there. All right, so to make your hand pie, go ahead and fold over your filling. And I fold away from myself, and then I pull back. And then what I do is I'll actually flour my hands up, especially like this, edge of my hand. And then I'm going to really pull that kind of tight and make a ball. And then with a fork is the great tool here. You're going to dip that fork in your flour, and then you can crimp. And we're just going to go around and crimp. And that crimping is with that glue of the egg wash in there. And then the fork pressing it together, you're going to get, that's going to hold together. And then actually the pastry the pastry cutter is our good tool here. I'm just going to trim this up a little bit and make it kind of pretty. And so there's that guy. We have a couple made here. And so we'll put that down and then do another. Yes, we have a question. The question is, do you need to vent it? And you can vent it. And so venting is where I would go ahead and I'd put poke a couple holes in the top. And so that allows steam to release. And so it's less likely to try to break through your seam on the edge. And so you're welcome to vent. With these, I find they hold up pretty well without venting, so I don't worry about that. So vent at your own discretion. If you feel like venting, vent away. If you feel like you can go unvented, then don't vent. But yeah, venting doesn't hurt anything. You might get the reason I wouldn't, why I don't vent is because you sometimes do get a little bit of juice coming up through there, and it's just can be a little messier. And then especially if you are using this as a packet, which you're walking around with, or like hiking around or climbing mountains, whatever you're doing, there's some holes in it. So I kind of like the idea of just this complete packet, but there, venting is a thing, and it's cool to vent. So here we're going to go ahead and just give a light brush. And there you have it. Now these can go in the oven, but first let's do we have a couple minutes. I know we're running a little late, but if you bear with me, we'll go ahead and do an apple. We'll just do one apple real quick, and then we'll have a look at the finished products. And I just want to show you how the apple filling behaves once it's chilled. So again, I'm going to roll it out. And this is a great piece of dough here. You can really see that butter laminating out. We have a nice chunk there, and that's great. It's nice. The more kind of big pieces of butter you see like that, the flakier your dough will be. And and so that's, again, the butter is hanging out in between the layers of flour, and it's giving us the flaky, crisp, delicate dough that we're looking for. Okay, again, I'm measuring using my hand, and that's about right. And then I've got somewhere in here, or around here. Oh, there it is. I have some apple filling. And so I have a nice, somewhat clean half cup measure. So with the apple filling, if it sits for a little bit, the juice is going to go to the bottom of your bowl. So you just want, before you use it, you want to stir it up a little bit and then go ahead and pop it in there so you have some juice. And then also with the apple filling, it's nice to put a little piece of butter in there. And this is a classic, like with an apple pie, you'll often kind of dot it with butter, and it enriches your filling a little bit, gives it a nice bit of buttery flavor in there. And again, just I'm folding away from myself and then pulling it in, a little bit of flour to help me, and you can see it is juicier than the fricassee. And then I want to crimp and trim. And then there's an apple hand pie. And let's go ahead and finish this up right here. Go ahead and brush it with your egg wash. And then I have some sparkling sugar. And sparkling sugar is just a beautiful finish for something like this. It also adds a lovely texture and this isn't a terribly sweet apple pie filling. So it adds a little sweetness, a little extra sweetness to it. And it looks nice. So it has great texture, looks nice. And so if you do pick up some crystal sugar, it's handy here, sparkling sugar, I think it's called. Or you can just use granulated sugar, or you don't have to add extra sugar, but it makes it just a little tastier. All right, so there we go. And now let's use the magic of television and our magic oven. See what we've got. Hey, we've got some pies here, and here's some finished pies. And then if you would, in there, I have a couple more. In my other magic oven, it will be, I forgot I have my finished chicken pot pies. Thank you. And here's the chicken pot pie. So I just want to open these up for us so we can have a peek at what lies inside and taste them too, right? And I'll have to taste them for you. So let's start with the chicken pot pie. Here we go. Here's the filling. And you can see it's nice and sturdy. I could go spelunking with this and I'd be in good shape, Tastes really good. A very good coffin. All right. Here's the apple pie. Again, we got a sturdy coffin. There we go, filling. And so you can see the apples, they do cook down, and then you get that little pocket. Yum, yum. Very delicious. All right, and we have a question, yes. We have a question. If you are taking the chicken pies on a hike, should you keep them cold? And yes, you should always refrigerate, meats and things like this. It is cooked chicken, so technically, it's like a sandwich. Say you have a ham sandwich, or so I'm not going to tell you what to do there, because I don't want to get into trouble. But in restaurants and things like that, there is a 4-hour window for foods before you have to pull them. So you have a good couple hours, or I like when you're packing a school lunch, it might hang out a couple hours. So same sort of thing. But if you have a way to chill it, it's not a bad idea. I always prefer to refrigerate than not, but it'll hold up also for a couple hours just fine. Yes, another question. Oh, okay. So the question is about adding the fresh herbs to the fricassee. So we added the thyme and we added the thyme with the bay leaf, and we added that when we added the chicken back in. And then let's see. Now I can't remember, but you add the thyme first. All right, so you add the thyme when you add the stock and the wine and stuff like that, and that's because the thyme is going to give you the thyme is going to infuse really nicely there with that bay leaf. And speaking of the bay leaf, now that my mixture is done, I can pull the bay leaf out to make sure that I don't chomp down on it inside a hand pie, right? So you always want to pull your bay leaf out. So the bay leaf and the thyme are aromatics for sure, and they're just going to give a nice flavor to all that sauce. And then we finished with the parsley and the tarragon, which are a little more delicate type fresh herbs, and you want them to stay a little fresher in the mix, and that will give them the full benefit. You get the full benefit from their beautiful delicate flavors. So the thyme goes in with the bay leaf, with the wine and the stock, and then you finish with the cream and the peas and the parsley and the tarragon. All right, well, that about wraps it up like a hand pie for tonight, this evening. Thank you so much for joining me and hanging out and bearing with our technical difficulties. This was a really great class for me. I love making these sorts of dishes and pies. We have some great classes coming up. Next week, it's the nutrition class, and it's going to be about Brussels sprouts and all kinds of good recipes, and talking about the benefits of this superfood. And then we're going to go into the week following that, we're going to get into turkey stuff, look at some turkeys. We're going to be selling turkeys in the market, and hopefully can answer some questions for you if you're planning on roasting a turkey, and we'll carve it up and all that good stuff. And then the week after that, on the 17th of November, we're going to go into some plant-based Thanksgiving holiday sides and main dishes. So please join us for all of these upcoming classes. Come into our market so you can see the locations there around the Portland area. You can get all these ingredients at our basics markets and talk to the friendly and knowledgeable staff. They'd be happy to help you with any of your questions and help you find ingredients. Thanks again. My name is Sam, and happy cooking.